Okay. How do I get my sound up? Shoot. Hello? What? Am I going to? They come on muted. I can unmute them. I don't, she couldn't tell me how many people would be there. If it's going to be 10, I would leave them unmuted, but what?
That just confirms for me that that's exactly what. Yeah. 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 Well, it must work.
What the heck was that? So what's the problem?
No, she saw her friend.
She saw what?
Standing at the edge up there. But her problem is that thing is loud. So that's why she couldn't hear that we were already close to the door. So it's so like, but you got 3 references. I got nothing for that.
So right now I'm here twice.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, okay, that's you. Okay.
That's a yes to attendees.
All right. What time is it really?
12:53.
Okay. So the problem is Monty's still asleep, and Stephanie, we don't know what the problem is.
And I gotta tell you, there are certain things in my life I can't put up with.
I know.
The 2 things are wishers. I wish this was happening to me because to me it's like, you know, something happened for you.
Right.
And some of it's luck and a lot of other things. But by and far, sometimes you just gotta go do.
I know.
And the second thing is when you're thinking.
Yeah.
I tell my girls, I prefer for you to walk in and be like, okay, Mom, this is what I did.
Oh, no, that's not fair, because that's what Sean did, and you wrote him up.
No, but let me preface it by saying, I prefer you to tell me what you did, because we will have a fair consequence to the problem, and I'll address it head on. I'll be upset, but at least it'll give me a moment to be like, okay, you came clear. But if you sneak around and then I find out, if you think that it was going to be bad when you told me, it's going to be worse. My husband's like, that's why I tell my husband all the time, you want to cheat? Just come to me the night of and say, I'm really tempted to cheat, or I might cheat on you tonight. So at least I'm ready. So, but if you sneak around, we're getting a divorce. It's like, Brenda, that makes me
Oh, no, mine is, I say to them, I understand if you want to do that, I'll have to organize it for you. He said, well, yeah, I'm too busy. Right, so I know I'm safe for now, you know.
Absolutely. It's like, anything can be solved with the truth. If you come to me.
All right. Oh my, there's no one signing on. Let's hope that the link worked and they can sign on. This has not been a good week to do this.
So you have 2 polls?
Yeah. So I'd like you to actually tell us what it looks like, what people are saying. One of them is, what do you worry about going wrong in your program?
What page are you on?
That's page 4. Okay. And the second one is on page 7. Which risk has impacted your organization the most? Okay. There's nobody else here. Hello?
And then they can ask questions. Are they going to be in the...
Wait, there are 3 attendees now. You didn't sign on again, did you? Hello?
Brian Sales is
Who? Brian Sales. All right, so hello? You unmuted him? Or?
You've muted the organizer. Oh. I got Go ahead.
Brian? Brian?
He's muted. He's muted.
Hello? Hello? All right, so now I've unmuted him.
Oh, he's muted by the organizer too.
Can you mute one of me?
So I've turned down.
Okay. Why can't we see him? You can see him, but I can't.
Can you see him?
Oh, there he is. Why can't we unmute him? Self-muted. Brian, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm unmuted now. I was muted for a second. I tried to. Hello?
Hi.
It sounds like somebody might be on a phone and a computer.
No, it's that we're both on. This is Brenda. I'm going to try to, I might have to log in as a guest.
Yeah, when we do this, sometimes when we get that feedback, typically whoever's talking might be on the audio computer and a phone.
Yeah.
No, we're not. We're both on audio.
Oh, you're same room?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
So we're gonna mute Brenda.
I don't think you can.
Yourself. First of all, how you guys doing today? I'm sorry, I didn't say hello.
We're good.
Very good. This is exciting. Looking forward to it.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Brian, this is Darlene.
Hi, Darlene.
Still
How
hear
are
that
you?
noise? Oh,
Hey, can you hear one of me or 2 of me?
There's an echo in the back. Are you guys going through the computer to do this, or are you using the phone? Because I was going to recommend trying the phone. That might work without the echo in the back. Sometimes that works better, but not sure.
All right, just bear with us 1 sec.
So, guys, I just want to give you a heads up that we are here at our new location, but I just received notice that there's a mandatory 2 o'clock meeting, but that doesn't mean that we have to end the webinar at 2. I will just have to leave a little bit earlier.
Okay,
All right,
thank
I'm
you.
gonna try and dial in. Although you don't hear an echo now, do you?
No, I don't actually.
You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear him, Darlene?
You hear me?
Hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Oh, that's because I'm using this. I can dial out on this number. Hello? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Okay, good. Okay. And you can only hear one of me, right?
There's still a bit of an echo, but I think if you just talk slow, it won't be as bad.
Okay. All right. So who have we got online? Yeah, Brian and Darlene. And you need to get off at 2, is that what you said, Darlene?
Correct.
Okay.
Should I send a reminder to the group? I sent an email out, but I can send a reminder.
Okay. We have Ashley on. Okay, Ashley can't be unmuted until I send her the pin. And I sent her the pin. Okay. And where's Ashley from?
Charlotte.
Columbia. I'm sorry, Charlotte.
Charlotte. Okay, great. So I'm assuming we should give it a couple minutes. Can you see my screen with this? This part? Oh, okay.
It's okay. I'll move it when you get started.
Okay.
You want me to record it?
It should be recording.
Okay.
So, Darlene, when will you be moving to your new space?
Actually, we moved in today, and it's really bright. It's a nice space. The lighting is fantastic, but we have the 2 o'clock mandatory meeting that we all have to be in attendance.
Okay. And do the people on the call have to be in attendance too?
No. This is only for National Urban League staff. So Renita is not in the office, but Renita hopefully will join us on the call. And I have the other senior director, Gene, who you haven't met, Aaron Thomas, here with me. He's not going to log in because he doesn't have his laptop and screen monitor set up yet. So he's over here with me at my station.
Okay, sounds good. So right now we have two attendees.
Larry Hemingway just
Okay.
came on.
So it's 1:05. Do people usually get on at 1, or should we give them another minute or two?
Let's just give them another minute or two. I just sent an updated calendar hole with the webinar information and asked that they log in now. So let's give them another minute or two.
Okay.
It's another beautiful day today. It's not like fall.
Do you want to say hi to Larry?
What?
Hi to Larry.
Larry and Ashley, I don't know if you're unmuted, but this is Jean, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jean, how are you doing?
I'm good. Is that you, Ashley?
Yes, ma'am.
Glad to have you on the call.
Thank you.
We have to send Larry the pin to get.
He's unmuted.
He's unmuted. Okay. So I won't start talking about risk management, but if you'd like, I'll talk about how my daughter-in-law is going to have a baby in 4 weeks, but you probably don't want to hear about that. It's hard for me not to talk about that all the time. So we just got she doesn't live near us. We just got new photos, so I made everyone in the office look at her. So.
Arlene, did you want to do a quick introduction, or we should wait, or we just want to go right into it? I know you and Jean worked out on everything.
So I'm not able to see how many people are on the call for some reason, but that's fine. So are we still at just 2 people?
We have Angela, Ashley, and Larry.
Interesting. I'm not sure what site Larry's from. But I think we should go ahead and if we're recording this. Is that correct, Jean?
You should be recording it. Yep.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and if others come on, then they can join us, but we'll be sure to share the recording with them later.
Okay.
So thank you guys for calling in. This is our scheduled monthly call, our check-in. We are really knee-deep in closing out 4th quarter of 2017, and some of you who have already allowed us to conduct our site visit, thank you. For those of you that we've not visited yet this year, look for emails from the team on trying to organize that and solidify the dates for that. So we talked a little bit about what would be some of the possibilities to include in our monthly check-in call based on the needs and the assessments that some of the partners with Brian and his team of folk decided that would be good for us to tack on to our monthly check-in. So this month, because we were going through a transition at National Urban League, I decided to forego even officially taking on this call as a check-in call, but decided to use it as an opportunity to discuss some important aspects of mentoring programming. And we have Jean, who is going to introduce herself and talk about all the wonderful things that she does and all of her credentials in mentoring and the programs. I mean, she just has so much information. If you guys haven't had a chance to meet her, I hope that you will soon. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about this topic, but also learning from Jean and the rest of the partners, as I hope you are eager to learn and listen as well. So, Jean?
Okay, thank you, Darlene. And I'm going to introduce my colleague, Brian Sales. Brian, can you just say a few words about yourself before I launch into my spiel?
Well, good afternoon or good morning to all of you. My name is Brian Sales. I'm Director of Training and Technical Assistance at Mentor, and we're very happy to have you all who are new to this, the Project Ready project. Very happy to be here with all of you and Jean is at our mentoring partnership, our affiliate in New York. Thank you.
So thanks for joining us. I've been in the mentoring space for 21 years, excuse me, most of them working for Mentor New York. But even in college, I was a mentor in a Big Sisters program. And so mentoring has been part of my adult life. And when I was a teenager, I had a mentor. So mentoring's really informed how I've grown up and become, hopefully, a mature adult. But what we're going to talk about today are some of the things that I've learned in working with the over 600 mentoring programs with which we deal. And just so you know that at Mentor New York, these 600 programs serve over 60,000 young people. So it's, even though so many of them are run so well, there are a lot of people, 60,000 people, and things can go wrong, can be unexpected, need to be planned for. And that's what Darlene asked us to talk a little bit about today. How can mentoring programs be really as well prepared as possible for some of the unusual things that pop up? So our goals for today are to actually to talk about the understanding what are the components of risk, what makes up risk. And it's not just what we think of in terms of an overall thing, but there are a lot of components to risk, and we're going to talk about them all. We're going to figure out ways to mitigate and reduce risk, meaning how can we help manage what kinds of risks that we're going to face and plan for them. We're going to work on a plan to protect the young people first and foremost, the program, and then all the adults involved in it, both the program staff and the mentors. We want everyone to be well protected. Part of that includes making sure that everyone in that whole continuum is well educated about what mentoring is meant to do, what it's not meant to do, what are some of the boundaries, what are some of the issues to be observed. And then finally, we're going to cover what additional resources there are for you to do your work well, okay? So I am going to ask you questions. And I want you to go ahead and answer our first poll and tell us, what do you worry about going wrong in your mentoring program? And you should be getting a poll that you can answer. Do you see that poll coming up? Do you see it?
I gotta mute everybody.
Yes.
Yes, you do. Okay, so go ahead and answer us. What do you worry about going wrong in your mentoring program?
Can we get some answers?
Yep. All right, we're gonna close. Oh, great.
Okay, so what are some of the answers?
40% harms. I'm gonna close the poll.
Okay.
33% harm to a child, 50% accidents, 67% funding, and 50% lack of mentors and mentees.
Okay, so you guys are worrying about the things that most mentoring programs worry about, right on top there. Okay, so very good. So some of the stuff we're going to cover today will help you with that. And just so you know, I didn't introduce my colleague Brenda Jimenez, who's our Director of Operations and Strategy Growth here at Mentor New York. She's helping me with this because I am technologically unschooled. So what is risk? So here's a definition. It's uncertainty about a future event that threatens your organization's ability to accomplish its mission. So when you think about that, the things you worry about are right on. They could threaten whether or not you can accomplish your goals. Funding, not having mentors and mentees, funding, an accident, harm to a child, all those things will threaten your organization's ability to move ahead. And in fact, since you're part of the Urban League, depending on what the risk and the future event is, you could actually impact the mentoring programs around the Urban League, not just in your own community. So what's risk management then? And risk management is not anything complicated. It's just the discipline of actually thinking about all the things that are uncertain, piece by piece, and trying to find a solution that either removes the risk or lowers the risk or shares the risk with someone else so that it's not all the burden of your organization. So just so you know, there is a book that's referenced at the end called More Than a Matter of Trust, Managing the Risks of Mentoring. And some of the work that I'm going to cite today is from that handout. It's actually referenced at the end, so you'll have a link so you can look at it. Okay? Very good. So let's move on to the next slide and take a look at, these are some of the risks that you identified, but also talk about in a little bit more detail. So life circumstances, what could that look like? Are the folks unmuted?
I'll unmute them now.
Brenda's going to unmute you. So what could life
because he didn't show up for miracle.
Maybe we can't do that.
Right. So how did he do it now when they let everybody else go?
Okay, maybe we can't unmute you. It's, there's too much background noise. I apologize. So let's just go through some of these different risks. There's negligence, which could be something as straightforward as not paying attention to whether or not mentors and mentees are actually meeting. That would be negligence. It could be negligence in terms of not completing a screening. It could be life circumstances in that if mentors and mentees have been matched for a while and all of a sudden the mentee has to move to Georgia or Alabama or North Dakota, you may have mentors and mentees split up and not be able to continue their work together. So all these different components are there that can impact your program. So maybe we can use the chat box. If you want to tell me, are there other risks that you see in your program? If you can type into the chat box, we can see it here, and that way we won't have to have the background noise. Are there other risks that you see for your program that we haven't identified here? We getting anything? Nope. Okay. Well, we're going to cover a bunch of these things. I'm going to ask you to answer this poll then. Which risk has impacted your organization the most? And if you haven't been impacted by risk, it's okay not to answer. Most mentoring programs experience some kind of risk impacting you. So go ahead and answer that for us, and we can talk from that.
Okay, 5 more seconds.
I'm sorry, what?
And we close the poll.
Okay, and which one is this?
It's 20% mentee, mentor, emotional vulnerability. 40% the boundaries is a big one. 20% is liability, and 20% is other.
Okay. And 20% was, the first one was mentor, mentee.
Emotional vulnerability was about 20%.
Okay. All right, so you've identified, which is really good because you've identified that it's not just physical danger, it's not just an accident that is at risk, it's how your mentors and mentees interact with each other, interact with families, and 40% of you said boundaries are an issue. So let's stop right here and talk about what are some of the ways to mitigate risk around appropriate boundaries for mentors and mentees. one of the very first things to do is to make sure that you're clear in your organizational structure. What are the appropriate boundaries, and how do we determine that? Well, if you've got a policy manual or a policy guidelines, it should lay out what some of the boundaries are. Some of those are physical actions, but they lead into emotional vulnerability as well. So, for example, if in fact one of your boundaries is mentors do not bring mentees to their home, that should be part of your policy manual. That's a best practice for managing risk. It keeps the boundary between the mentor and the mentee more clear, excuse me, and that makes it easier for you as you talk to the mentor, or as appropriate, the mentee and his or her family, about what the boundaries are. The mentor is not part of your family. You don't go to each other's home. And that's a case where taking an issue that's a boundary issue and translating it into part of your policy helps reinforce what you want to have for the mentors and mentees to understand. Emotional and mentor-mentee emotional vulnerability, that's a really challenging risk that your organization will have. And it comes with the fact that many of our mentees are in challenging circumstances. That's why they're in your mentoring program. And they may be especially vulnerable because of the circumstances that they have had to live through. They may be trauma-informed youth. They may be living through disruptions in their home. Some of them may be homeless. Some of them may be in foster care. Some may have a parent or sibling who are really ill. That makes them more emotionally vulnerable. And it's a fact of life for many of your mentoring programs that those are the children you're trying to help. But what are some of the ways that you can reduce your risk about that emotional vulnerability? Well, that would speak to, one, that you're appropriately screening your mentors and mentees to make sure that they're both ready to be in a mentoring relationship. You're screening your mentors for safety, but you're also screening them to make sure that they have the skills or can be trained in the skills for working with youth who are in challenging circumstances. And for the mentees, is the mentee in a stable enough situation where he or she can form an attachment, a mentoring relationship with another adult? There are some children, based on their circumstances at this moment, who shouldn't be put into a mentoring program because they're not able to manage a new relationship with another adult. That doesn't mean we don't want to hurt we don't want to help those children, but we want to make sure that they're stable enough to be able to be in a mentoring program. So part of the way you manage the risk is you make sure that the mentees are ready to be in a mentoring program. Now, please don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that we don't want to help children who are emotionally at risk, but those children deserve perhaps professional support, not from a volunteer mentor, even though I firmly believe that volunteer mentors changed my life and changed many lives. But we don't want to give a child a volunteer when he or she needs professional help first. So perhaps mitigating against mentor-mentee emotional vulnerability is to be certain that the child is ready to be in a mentoring relationship. And if not, then you're making sure that that child gets professional help first. And then when they're ready to be in a mentoring relationship, you bring them in with open arms. So does that all make sense? And I can't see if you're nodding your head. If it doesn't make sense, hit the chat box and let me know, okay? All right. So we're going to move on. So how do we plan for some of these risks? So a plan includes staffing. That means everybody on your team understands what your policy is, understands the logic behind it, understands that there is a policy. If you're not certain and someone says, well, it's okay if I do X, Y, Z, before a staff member answers, they know the policy. And so they're giving out accurate information so that you're educating everybody who's coming in contact with the mentor-mentee pair knows the same story. It also includes screening both volunteers and mentees. And I'm going to talk about screening in a little more detail later. But I think it's really important to emphasize here that screening includes making sure that somebody's not interested in harming a child, obviously, but also has a lifestyle and the judgment process in place to be a good mentor. So you could have a person who's a great person, but still has a few DWIs on their record. I'm not sure I want him to be a mentor because he's got a problem with alcohol. And it may not be filtering over to other parts of his life, but I want to think about, is that the kind of person I want to be a mentor? So screening is complicated, and it's not just to screen out criminals, it's also to screen out people who might be inappropriate, okay? Your plan should include training. Everybody who's engaged in your mentoring program needs to be trained. The staff needs to understand what your policies are and how to interact. The mentors need to be trained. Families need to be trained so that they understand and have clear expectations about what mentoring is about. One of the things when I was a mentor was very scary to me was the first time my 7th grader said, my mom says you can take me to whatever movie you want. I called her mom and said she wants me to take her to this R-rated horror movie. And her mother said, I have so much confidence in you, Mrs. Cohen. I know it'll be fine. And I said, no, I'm not going to take her to a movie like that because I'm uncomfortable about it. And if you want to take her to a movie like that, that's okay, but it's not my place. I don't want her mom giving up her responsibility to say, no, that's not okay for my child, even if she has confidence in me. So we have to make sure that the family understands that they have that opportunity to set rules for their family, their child. We make sure the mentor abides by them, and that there are clear expectations on everybody's part, okay? Another piece about this, and I mentioned it before, is to actually have the policies in place, have the procedures in place. So, for example, if a mentee unfortunately falls down and breaks her wrist, what's the procedure, what's the policy that you follow to get her medical help? Do you have a form that allows the mentor to take her to an emergency room? Is the mentor supposed to reach a parent or guardian? Who holds that document to let her be treated? Who at your site at the Urban League is notified? Is there a report that the mentor is supposed to fill out explaining it? And what's the time frame? All those things should be in place so that, God forbid, if something happens, the organization and the young person are treated the way they should supposed to be. And then all interactions with mentees and families should really be planned and thought out. Mentors really mean well, and they volunteer because they want to help a child. But sometimes their life experiences don't match the life experiences of the family. And so what they take as a norm, as a normal thing, might be a surprise to a mentoring family. I explained to one of my mentees' friends one day, I had a puppet that we used to tell stories, and she said, where is the puppet? I said, he's home in my dining room. And she looked at me with such shock. She said, you have a dining room? How many people live in your house? 100? Well, for her, a dining room was the cafeteria at school. She didn't know a home that had a dining room. So that's just a simple example of how what I took as a norm was totally outside her frame of reference. And even now, as I say it, I might not be able to stop myself from just answering that way, but you want to make sure mentors understand how to interact with families. Okay? Make sense? And the final thing I want to say as you plan for your organization, to really mitigate risk is to have regular supervision of mentors and the mentoring matches. Supervision can take many forms. It can be you bring them together for a cup of coffee and a half an hour learning experience, but then you also talk about how the matches are going, what things are challenging for them, what things they find they're not sure how to handle. You want to hear what the mentee and the families are saying. All of that goes into supervision. So it is the case that once you match a mentor and mentee following all your best plans for risk and management of risk, it's just the beginning of really trying to manage what are the things that can go wrong or should be supervised. So that supervision is important, right? So one of the things that's really important for planning to mitigate against risk is that you consistently apply the policies and the procedures you've put in place. So a really good example is we were just at a Urban League affiliate, and an important person who's employed there wants to be a mentor, and he chuckled and said, but I haven't had time to go through the training yet, so they won't match me with a student. That's a best practice. Nobody gets to be a mentor unless they've been trained. And I was relieved and encouraged the coordinator and said, that's a good thing. I know you want this person to be a mentor and he'll be great, but following your policy and procedure means that you're mitigating against risk, and you can use that as an example with your insurance company to say, we follow all the rules and we're trying to keep the kids as safe as possible, okay? The other thing about the consistent plan is that it's written down somewhere. I don't know about your organizations, but in my time at Mentor New York, I've had probably 30 different people work for me. People come, people go. Their life changes. Someone snatches them away with an offer of more money, or they decide to move someplace warmer. Although I have to tell you, it's pretty warm here. It's still 80 degrees here. But the bottom line is you want to have a plan that's written down. So if you've decided this is how we're going to screen, this is how we're going to interact with mentees and families, this is what supervision is going to look like, write it down. It doesn't have to be a novel. It should be, though, this is what we do. So that when you have a new staff person, they're going to follow what you've determined to be all the best practices to keep the kids safe, the mentors safe, and the organization safe. So you're going to apply your plan consistently, and you're going to make sure it's written down and followed. So I'm going to stop for a second. If you want to use your chat box, do you have any questions? Is any of this a big surprise to you? Are these things you're doing already? Can you let me know if this is new, or am I singing to the choir? Do you guys know all this already? Do you have any feedback from me? Nope. All right, so let's move on. And you can add a question as you move along. Okay? So we're going to talk about screening mentors. And one of the things I want to say is
Somebody said yes, and you're singing to the choir, Ashley.
singing to the choir. Okay, thank you, Ashley. I should really have you join in here. Okay. Well, I apologize if this is not news to you, but I'm glad that you're already doing all these things. That's awesome. So I thank you for sitting through it. So we're going to talk to what goes into screening mentors. This is what the best practices have been determined to be by Mentor and Mentor's Blue Ribbon panel of mentoring experts who help every several years review and revise the elements of effective practice for mentoring. The people who revise those elements of effective practice look at the most recent research, what results have come about through recent cases, what are some of the best practices resulting from new kinds of mentoring like electronic mentoring. And so what I'm going to talk about in terms of screening mentors comes from those best practices. So the first thing is a written application. And some of these things might go without saying, but Brenda and I do work with a network of mentoring programs who, how shall I say this? They take referrals from professors for people to be mentors. And if the professor refers a student to be a mentor, they just take the student. Now, that's not a best practice for mentoring. In fact, it made me choke when I heard it. So here are some of the things. I'm sure you're doing these, but we'll just put them out on the screen. A written application, an in-person interview. And the reason you want to do an in-person interview is that you guys are all experts in working with people. You know that body language is going to tell you things about how a person is comfortable or uncomfortable. If there's a question that you're not sure you're getting a straight answer on, you'll be able to explore in more depth. An in-person interview is important. A criminal background check. I know there's a standard for the Urban League, and that's really important. It's important because there are all different kinds of people who might want to come forward to be mentors. And we know that some of them have criminal records. Some of them are people who might want to harm children but don't have a criminal background check yet, have a criminal record yet, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But then there are other people who are like the person with the DWIs. They might not be terrible people, but they might have bad judgment. And using a criminal background check allows you to screen out those people that you don't want to be in a mentoring program. We had a case for a guy that was very well respected in the community, did a lot of good work with civic organizations, was getting a messy divorce from his wife, and was not allowed to see his children without supervision. And now you might say to yourself, well, sometimes divorces get really messy. That might not be his fault, and that's true. Not all divorces are happy and agreeable. That's why the people are getting divorced. But when he was questioned about it, he lost his temper and threatened the person asking the question. And that's on him. And that meant we don't want him in your mentoring program, right? So the whole process of that interviewing and doing the background check surfaced for the mentoring program that they didn't want that person paired with a child, not as safe as it could be, all right? References. Sometimes people say to me, well, it's sort of foolish to check references because nobody would give you a reference if they weren't going to get a good response from the person that they gave as a reference. But that's not always true. So sometimes if you've done a really good in-person interview, you'll have a question or two to ask a reference that's pointed that will help you understand them better. So my colleague Bruce Beckwith here, who is the Director of Program Development, ran a program for 7 years, many years ago, and he cites a woman who was sort of impatient about the screening process. And so, and at one point she got sort of cross at him. And he thought, is this just how I'm managing it? Like, am I too slow for her? Or does she have a problem with impatience and anger? So in one of his reference checks, he didn't say, does she ever get angry? What he said to the reference was, can you tell me about a time when you saw her lose her temper? And what was that like? And the person said, oh, well, you know, a couple of weeks ago we were out at dinner and the waiter brought the wrong food and she really yelled at him. It wasn't, you know, wasn't perfect. He should have noticed that it was wrong, but he didn't. But she really lost her temper in a way that I was sort of embarrassed. And what that did for Bruce was it confirmed his gut feeling that she was not going to be a patient enough person to deal with a kid who had plenty of challenges already. And he didn't take her as a mentor. And when he told her she wasn't accepted, she screamed at him. So another good example that's not good control. All right, so you got to check references. If you want to check driving record and an insurance, if in fact your mentors are driving your youth around, and maybe you could put in your chat box and tell me, do your mentors drive your kids around, or do you only meet on site at the Urban League? If you can tell us that. Now, some programs that don't let their kids be driven by mentors still check a driving record just as another opportunity to find out more about people. But anybody who lets the mentors drive kids obviously has to check. Are we getting some answers there? Not yet. Okay. And obviously, if you're letting a mentor drive, you need to make sure that the mentor is insured. Okay.
We meet on site.
Meet on site, yeah.
Yes, actually, if we go on field trips, our mentors meet us on site.
Ah, excellent. So you do have some field trips, but the mentors aren't driving the kids. Okay, that's good. So that eliminates one kind of risk. Because even if the mentor is a really good driver, when a mentor is driving a kid, not everybody else on the road is a really good driver, and your mentee and mentor could be hurt in an accident that's not the mentor's fault, right? Okay, great. The sex offender database is another way to check whether or not a mentor is appropriate to be in your mentoring program. And I will say it's a simple thing to do to check the sex offender database. There is a bit of a wait to get results, at least in New York, but it's a nominal fee, and it actually is pretty useful and pretty straightforward to check. So I had a faith-based mentoring program that hired someone to run the program and didn't bother to check to see that he was a level 3 sex offender. So it would have been a pretty simple thing to check and see if this person was a good fit for their mentoring program. Okay. Another piece is your evaluation. So let me just say right here that your expertise, and you obviously know what you're doing because you told me you're doing all these things I'm preaching to the choir. I'm just going to reinforce for you that how you are evaluating the person is as critical as almost anything else in this plan. You have the right to say, I'm not comfortable with this person. Just like Bruce did, he was uncomfortable. He identified something about that woman that he wasn't sure was going to be good for the kids in his program. Now, he was able to verify it by asking a reference, but that evaluation that you're making is a good evaluation and is part of screening. So I'll go on to say, no one has a legal right to be a volunteer in your program. This is not like hiring an employee. An employee has certain rights, or a potential employee, not to be discriminated against, to be considered based on only on their ability to do the job, can't be unfairly biased against him or her. That's what an employee has, a potential employee. Those are the rights of people looking for jobs. But people who want to be a volunteer in your program don't have those rights. No one has a legal right to be a volunteer in your program. So that means if you are uncomfortable about an answer that a mentor gives you, a potential mentor, if you're uncomfortable about topics that they raised in the training, if you're uncomfortable about how they interact with other people in a training, you should take that into account. And you have the right to say, I'm not going to take this person because of my discomfort here. There is no recourse that they can have against you because no one has a legal right to be a volunteer. So I'll take this one step further. If you are at the Baptist Church and your mentoring program is designed to help young people become adults in the Baptist Church and what it means to be an adult in your faith, you have a legal right to say, I only want Baptists to be mentors in my program. Okay? You can't do that if you're hiring an assistant or a salesman or an executive director. Okay? But to be a volunteer in your program, you have the right to determine what are the qualifications I need to have to be a successful mentor here. All right? Does that make sense? So, okay. Okay. Brian is suggesting that I tell you where to find the sex offender database. So I don't know if I put it in the references or not, but you can write this down. www.N as in Nancy, S as in Stephen, O, P as in Paul, N as in Nancy, w.gov. So NSOPW.gov. Okay? All right. The next point I want to make, and this is really important and sometimes uncomfortable, if it has to do with matching a child or the safety of a child, you can ask any question that you want of a potential volunteer. So I gave you the example of the Baptist Church. Ordinarily, you wouldn't ask someone, what's your religion? What church do you go to? But if your mentoring program is helping young people become adults in the Baptist Church, and if the parents of the child are expecting a Baptist mentor, you can ask someone what their faith is, or do they practice their religion, because you want to match that child appropriately. By the same token, if it has to do with the safety of a child, you can ask any question that you want to. So if your mentoring program allowed mentors to bring the mentee to their home, maybe it's an afternoon of watching a football game or making cookies, then you would want to ask a lot of questions about what that person's home life was like. For example, does he have a firearm? Is it locked away? Where is the ammunition? Does he have illegal drugs? Does he keep pornography at home? These are somewhat intrusive questions, I know, but in fact, that would have to do with the safety of the child, and you would have a right to ask those questions. Now, if someone is uncomfortable about this, you want to think about what do I need to explain to them before they start the interview process about what kinds of things we're going to expect from them and why, and explain to them why we're going to do it. and then you want to be able to answer their questions about it. But the bottom line is you're going to err on the side of keeping that young person safe by finding everything out that you possibly can. We had a circumstance, by the way, several years ago. It's a mentoring program for pregnant and parenting teen girls. And the coordinator called me very anxious because a man had called her up and said he wanted to be a mentor in the program. Their program only used women as mentors. And in fact, they only used women who had had children of their own. That was their model. And when the coordinator explained that to the man, he said, well, that's ridiculous because these girls need good male role models. They probably don't have good father figures. And I think you should take me. And the coordinator said, I can't. It doesn't match our model. And then he threatened to sue her. That's discrimination. You have to take me to be a mentor. So luckily, she paid attention to my workshop and said, no one has a legal right to be a volunteer in my program. And she said, I'm sorry, sir, I'm not going to take you. But then, of course, she hung up and called me up and said, I hope you were right, Jean, because this guy is going to sue me. I said, well, he's probably not going to sue you because I doubt if any lawyer will take this case because he doesn't have a legal right. And you do want to think about what kind of a person is going to threaten a coordinator because she won't take him as a mentor. Even if he weren't contravening the guidelines of her program, maybe that's the kind of person who shouldn't be a mentor anyways. Somebody who's so sure that he's right, fairly judgmental in the things he said to her. Maybe he's not a good potential mentor anyways, even if he doesn't have a criminal background, because all of those things go into trying to make a good match for a student. And the final thing you want to think about as part of your coordinator's evaluation is, can this person be managed? Meaning, is he going to follow the rules of my program? Is she going to think she knows better than I do what should be done for the student, whether or not she should follow the rules? When I tell her that she has to only meet at a certain place, is she going to pay attention to that? Or is she going to arrange to meet the student at another time? Not to be harmful, but just because she thinks she knows better. You want to be able to be confident that all these good policies and rules you've put in place, the mentors are going to pay attention to them. So I'll give you another real-life example of a program that was site-based, and the mentor decided it was the mentee's birthday, and it would be really nice to go on an outing to an amusement park. So she arranged on a Friday night to take her mentee to this amusement park. And they went on some rides for about an hour, and then it was time to go home, and the mentee said, no, I'm not going home. And the mentor was stunned and said, well, no, we have to go home now. I told your mom, you know, whatever. And the mentee said, no, I'm not going home, and you can't make me. So she went on some more rides, and the mentor was arguing with her, challenging her. Finally, she got a hold of the mentoring coordinator and said, I don't know what to do. And the mentoring coordinator arguably said, well, that's why you're not supposed to break the rules. You're supposed to meet her on site, because we knew that for her, she could follow the rules on site. But if you met her off site, you might not be able to control her. That's how your policy plays into managing your risk. Because trust me, even though the mentor broke the rules, that program still could be liable because they put her together with that mentee. Heaven forbid the girl decided never to go home, right? Or she was going to stay all night with the kid who ran the carousel or whatever. So you want to, as part of your coordinator's evaluation, do all these things about criminals, references, sex offender databases, but you also want to take your own evaluation as an important part of whether or not you're going to take that person on. So, do we have any questions at this part? This is important, the screening of mentors. Have we got any questions here? Nope. So one of the questions people ask me at this point is, how do I turn down a volunteer? I spend so much time trying to get new mentors, and then somebody comes along and I think, I'd really like to take her, but she's not quite right. So there are two things I would say to that. One is, you don't have to give a person a reason why you're not taking them, okay? And I would encourage you to say, I appreciate your volunteering, but I don't have an appropriate match for you right now, and I thank you for coming forward. And then the second thing is to remind yourself that your evaluation of the person, all the different components about who they are an important part of why you decided not to take them. And I would encourage you to write that down and put it in your folder about this person, so that if someone comes back and says to you, why didn't you take so-and-so? She's such a lovely person. You can remind yourself. You don't necessarily want to share it with anybody except your supervisor, but you can be comfortable that there was a thought process you went through that had the best interest of the kids at heart. Okay? You don't have to give anyone a reason about why you're not taking them. All right? Now, sometimes it's tricky because you'll have someone who's a board member, and you know they're really nice people, but they're way too busy. They miss meetings, they're late. You know that they're not going to be able to be consistent for a young person. And that's a case where you might have another way for them to volunteer and help. Maybe they can help teach a workshop on financial literacy for kids. Maybe they can help with a holiday get-together or a mentor recognition at the end of the year. There might be other ways for them to actually be helpful to your program without actually pairing them with a child. All right, so we're going to move along and talk about supervision of matches. So, supervision of matches is actually where the rubber meets the road and the difference between a really good program and a great program. And I know you all want to have great programs. You probably do already. But supervising matches by checking with mentors, mentees, and families is a way to keep track of how things are going. So you're checking with the mentors, asking them, do they have challenges? What are some of the things that are difficult? And you're listening carefully about it. You're talking individually with the mentees. What do you like about going out with Harry? Is there any time that you're uncomfortable when you're out? Like, does he drive too fast? Does he make you eat food like escargot that you don't want to eat? Whatever kinds of questions, find out what's going on with them. Give everybody a chance to talk about it. And then also a conversation with families. One of the things you want to hear is that the mentor, the mentee, and the family are all reporting the same kinds of activities and the same kinds of feelings about it. So the mentor might tell you, oh, I'm so excited because my mentee loves to play tennis and I'm teaching him to play tennis. And the mentee might say, well, tennis is okay. And the mother might say, I don't know why he's teaching him tennis. He really hates tennis. So all of a sudden right there, that's not a dangerous situation with respect to the safety of the child, but it is a risk to your program because there's a chance that match won't last because the mentor's not paying attention to what's moving the child. So checking in with mentors, mentees, and families is really important. Now, I know you all wear many hats and are doing many programs at the Urban League, but I have to tell you, this is a place where sending that short email saying, how's it going, probably won't answer your question, but you can make sure that you take an opportunity, whether it's at a holiday get-together or a time when families, kids, and mentors come together for an end-of-the-year picnic, that you actually get a couple of minutes alone with a mom or a dad, a few minutes alone with a mentee to hear how's it going. Is there a workshop you're offering to mentees where you can talk and hear how his or her match is going? And when you collect that information and look at each match, you'll get a picture of, this is exactly what each party is telling me, that more or less the same thing, or wait, there's a disconnect here that I'm going to have to explore. So supervising matches is a way to make sure that you're staying on track. So you need to have more of a conversation than just, how's it going? And my son used to have standard answers when he came home from school. I'd say, how was school? Fine. What did you learn? Nothing. What did you do? Nothing. What do you want to do now? Nothing. You know, so you have to have a little bit more conversation to find out what's going on. Sometimes what we encourage you to do is to actually have group sessions for mentors for their support and for surfacing issues. Now, that sounds complicated, but it can be as simple as getting the local pizzeria to donate 2 pizza pies and having a bottle of wine and pizza for mentors one night in January during National Mentoring Month. And just listening to how things are going, ask them you want to hear what new things they want to suggest or what things they could need help with, and then pay attention to what they tell you. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. But keeping track of how it's going is really important in terms of managing risk. Okay, I just said simple email questions don't get to the issues. All right. So let's talk for a second about child abuse and neglect, and then we'll take some questions at the end. Different states have different laws, but I'm going to talk about New York State. In New York State, volunteers are not legally mandated reporters. That's just so you know that that's the law here. I believe in California, all volunteers are legally mandated reporters, but not here in New York. But all mentors, all of them, have a moral mandate to support and protect a child by reporting issues to program coordinators. And there are guidelines for dealing with disclosure. That means that for a mentor who's working with a child 12 years old or older, not a 7-year-old, but a 12-year-old, that they lay ground rules out pretty early in the relationship. So the mentor and mentee are all on the same page. And it goes like this. I'm your mentor, and I very much want to hear what matters to you and what you'd like to talk about. And you should know that I'm going to keep confidential whatever you tell me, unless you tell me something that makes me think you're in risk of being hurt, hurting yourself, or hurting someone else. If you tell me something like that, then I have to be the one to decide whether or not I get help for us. If you lay those ground rules in advance, then when a youngster decides to share something with you, they know that in fact you're going to look for more help. So I told you before that we work with 60,000 mentoring matches. We don't know of a mentoring match where the relationship has ended when the mentor has reported to Child Protection Services that the child was at risk for being hurt. I say that because the mentors laid out the ground rules. The mentors told the children, I'm going to get help for you. So in fact, when the child asks or tells the mentor whatever it is they're going to tell them, they are in fact asking for help. So sometimes mentors will say, well, I didn't want to report it because I didn't want to undermine the trust I've built up. But the bottom line is, if a mentor really wants to be the kind of role model that they want to be, that we've asked them to be, then they need to live up to their word, which is, if you tell me something that makes me think you're going to get hurt or hurt someone else, we're going to get help. And in fact, you want the mentor to be that kind of person, to be that kind of role model. And it's sometimes hard for them to believe, but it's not an accident when young people share something with an adult. Young people certainly can keep secrets if they don't want to share it, and they do. But when they do share that, they want the mentor to help them. And what we want to do is encourage the mentor to be the kind of person that he wanted to be when he became a mentor, to have a child's best interest at heart. That's sometimes hard for them to believe, but in fact, we've seen it on many occasions where young people actually are expecting the mentor to give them help. So now I'm going to ask, are there any questions that we can answer for you? We're out of time, but I'm going to take a few questions. There aren't so many of you. Can we unmute these folks? You can easily use your chat box. Brenda is unmuting you, so if you just want to ask a question, you can. Any questions?
Jean, thank you very much for the overview. This is Brian. I'm not sure who's on the call other than Ashley.
One of the things they tell you about open space is that you need to train your staff in soft skills. And you were holding this mark, and when you had everybody in that cramped ass space, to not only to look at the people around you and notice how the
you help back.
You never paid attention to it. Never paid attention to it. Never took the temperature of what was going on.
Everybody.
All you did was make notes, and that in itself is just tiring. And then you don't. I don't want to hire any outside people, but you needed to have somebody from the outside tell you, this is what your staff is going through. This is the temperature of your staff right now. You want a good transition. This is what you need. So don't be surprised if people act out. But don't be surprised that you get on the news because somebody gets because you've taken away everything.
I'm trying. Hello?
You said, oh, we all
Hello?
Who's mute? Renita? That's Renita.
Michelle?
Somebody from your office?
I am going to, since you didn't get a chance to see everything, I am going to scan that paperwork. I'm going to put it in the machine.
Is that Renita?
Yeah, can you
I have it, so I can
we're gonna mute Renita. Can you do that?
Yeah, mute Renita.
Okay, we're gonna do that.
There you go.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
I was trying to answer the question, and then I got confused. What's the question? Okay. Sounds like a problem. Okay. All right. So, what things would you like to know more about? There are some samples here, but are there things we didn't cover? Things you want us to send you more information about, to talk about? So on this next page, there's some resources that you can take a look at, and go ahead, call up some of these things that would be helpful to you. The most important thing for you to remember about our presentation today is to come up with a safe plan, make sure that it's documented, and then you follow through consistently. Those are the three critical pieces of managing the risk that faces your organization. I'm realizing that we want to be able to let you go. So we're going to, there are two things. One is Darlene will send you this PowerPoint, so you'll have all the resources in it. She'll also send you a really short questionnaire to see if it covered the things that you were expecting. And at the very beginning of it, you saw my email address and Brian's email address. I invite you to reach out to us with a specific question about the policies or the issues that you've seen raised in your organization, and let us see if we can't find answers for you with the thousands of programs with which we work. I'm going to let you go. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Brian. I don't know if Darlene's still on the call, but I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you. And I thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. What was on? One and walking on. Right here.